Somewhere in this country right now, someone is lying in their own bed, in their own home, listening to a sound they cannot explain, telling themselves it is the pipes, telling themselves it is the wind, telling themselves it is anything at all, except what some part of their brain already knows it is. They are lying very still. They are hoping that if they do not move, whatever is making that sound will not know they are awake. That is where tonight's stories begin, not in the wilderness, not in some abandoned place far from any road, in a home, behind a locked door, inside walls that someone trusted completely. Welcome to Midnight Outcry. Tonight, every account you are about to hear takes place inside a residence, an apartment, a house, a space that belonged entirely to the person telling you this story, a space where they had lived for months or years, a space where they knew every sound, every shadow, every ordinary creak and groan of settling wood and aging pipe. The familiarity is what makes these accounts so difficult to process, because when something is wrong inside a place you know that well, you cannot blame the strangeness of the environment. You cannot tell yourself you were simply unfamiliar with the place. You know the place. You know it the way you know your own face. And something was wrong inside it anyway. The accounts you are about to hear were submitted to this channel by real people who have asked for varying degrees of privacy, and we have honored every single one of those requests. First names only, or chosen pseudonyms selected by the narrators themselves. No addresses, no identifying locations beyond a general region. Nothing about these accounts has been invented or dramatized. These are the stories as they were told to us, preserved as faithfully as we could manage, in the narrator's own voices and in their own words. If you are watching this channel for the first time, please subscribe now and turn on the notification bell. We upload new accounts every week, and the ones arriving in our inbox are becoming increasingly difficult to explain away. Now let us get into it. The footprints came out of my basement, crossed the kitchen floor in a perfectly straight line, and stopped at the foot of my bed. There were no footprints leading back. I know this because I followed them in reverse with a flashlight at 5 in the morning, my hands shaking badly enough that the beam kept jumping, and I traced every single impression across the hardwood and down the basement stairs and to the concrete floor below, and they simply ended there in the middle of the basement floor, as though whatever had made them had materialized out of nothing and walked in one direction only. That was the first morning. There were 11 more before I left that house and did not go back. My name is Dara. I am 33 years old, and this happened when I was 29, in a house I had been renting for about 7 months in a semi-rural area of central Pennsylvania. The house was old, built in the early 1940s, my landlord had told me, with a partial basement that ran under the kitchen and back hallway, but not under the rest of the structure. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a covered front porch that faced a county road, and about 2 acres of land that was mostly overgrown field running back to a tree line at the rear of the property. I had rented it because it was affordable, and because I had recently started a remote data entry position that allowed me to live anywhere with a decent internet connection. And rural Pennsylvania had been affordable enough that I could have the space I wanted without spending more than I earned. I am not someone with a history of anxiety. I do not have a pattern of frightening experiences. Before this house, the most frightening thing that had ever happened to me was a car accident on an icy road when I was 22, and that was at least something I could name and understand. The autumn I moved in was warm and dry, and the house felt genuinely welcoming in a way that older structures sometimes do. The floors were scuffed in patterns that suggested decades of foot traffic, and I found that comforting rather than unsettling. Old houses have histories, and I have never found histories frightening in themselves. I set up my office in the larger of the 2 bedrooms and slept in the smaller one, which had a window that faced the field and the tree line beyond it, and on clear nights, the moon came through that window and filled the room with a pale, steady light that I found easier to sleep in than full darkness. The first thing I noticed was small, and I almost did not notice it at all. About 3 weeks after I moved in, I went down to the basement to check the water heater, which had been making a noise my landlord described as normal, but which I wanted to see for myself. The basement was accessible through a door in the back hallway, and the stairs were wooden and steep, and the space below was unfinished, concrete floor and block walls, and a single bare bulb on a pull chain. I went down, looked at the water heater, confirmed it was doing nothing alarming, and was turning to go back up when I noticed a smell. It was faint, and it was gone within seconds, but it was the smell of something living, something animal, close and warm and faintly organic. I pulled the light chain and stood in the dark for a moment with my hand on the stair rail. I could not hear anything. The smell did not return. I went back upstairs and told myself something had gotten into the crawl space, which was a reasonable thing to tell myself given the age and condition of the house. 6 weeks after I moved in mid-November, I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of footsteps in the kitchen directly below my bedroom. They were slow and deliberate, not the quick soft pattering of an animal, and they moved in a straight line from one end of the kitchen to the other, 3 or 4 steps, and then stopped. I lay completely still and listened, nothing else. I got up eventually, turned on every light between my bedroom and the kitchen, and went through the entire ground floor. Every exterior door was locked, every window was latched, the kitchen was empty and undisturbed. My deadbolt on the back door, the one that led to the hallway above the basement, was locked from the inside with the chain thrown. I checked the basement, nothing. I went back to bed and did not sleep again until dawn, and when the sun was up and the house was full of ordinary morning light, I was almost able to convince myself it had been the house settling, the particular sound old structures make when they cool overnight. I should have called my landlord the next morning. I know that now. I did not, because I did not want to seem like someone who could not manage a normal old house, and because I had nothing to report except a sound in the night that I could not prove had been what it sounded like. So I waited, and 2 nights later, the same sound, slow, deliberate, straight-line footsteps across my kitchen floor, and then silence. This time I did not get up. I lay in my bed and I stared at the ceiling and I waited, and at 4:30 a.m, the sound came again, but different this time, not crossing the kitchen but coming up the stairs, 1 step at a time, slow and measured, and stopping at the top. My bedroom door was closed. I could see the gap under it from my bed, and the hall light I had started leaving on showed nothing. No shadow interrupting the light, nothing visible. I lay there for 40 minutes, and then nothing further happened, and at some point I fell into a thin, exhausted sleep and woke up when my alarm went off and felt, for a moment, absolutely certain that it had been a dream. It was not a dream. I know this because that morning was the morning I found the footprints. They came out of the basement door in the back hallway, which was standing open. I was certain I had closed and latched it the night before, because I had developed the habit of checking it every evening before bed. The prints crossed the hallway floor, crossed the kitchen in a straight line, continued through the living room, turned down the short corridor to my bedroom, and stopped at the foot of my bed. They were not shoe prints. They were bare footprints, human in proportion. The ball and heel and the impressions of 5 toes clearly defined in something dark and slightly gritty, like fine soil or dust carried in from outside. I stood in my bedroom doorway and looked at them for a long time. The bed was made exactly as I had left it when I got up. The room was exactly as I had left it. The prints stopped perhaps 8 inches from the edge of the bed frame, pointing toward where I had been sleeping, and there were no prints facing the other direction. Whatever had made them had not turned around. I called my landlord. He came that afternoon and walked through the house with me and looked at the prints and was quiet for a long time before he said he thought I had probably tracked something in from outside and not noticed. I pointed out that the prints originated at the basement door. He looked at the basement door. He looked at me. He said there was probably an animal getting in through the crawl space venting, and I should call an exterminator. He did not look at me the way a person looks at someone they believe. He looked at me the way a person looks at someone they want to stop talking. I photographed everything before he arrived, and I have those photographs. The exterminator came 3 days later and found no evidence of any animal in the crawl space. He found no gaps in the venting large enough for anything substantial to pass through. He found the same faint organic smell I had noticed weeks earlier and could not identify it. Over the next 10 days, The footprints appeared 4 more times, always originating from the basement, always in a straight line to my bedroom, always stopping at the foot of the bed. I stopped sleeping in the bedroom and started sleeping on the couch with every light in the house on. On the 8th day, I heard the footsteps again at 3 in the morning, and I watched from the couch, and nothing came through the living room. And in the morning, the prints were at the foot of my empty bed again, stopping exactly where my feet would have been if I had still been sleeping there. The 11th morning, I woke up on the couch and found a single print on the floor beside me, pointing toward my face. No other prints around it, as though something had simply appeared beside me while I slept to look at me from a distance of 2 feet. I was out of that house by the end of the week. I broke my lease and paid the penalty, and I did not care. My landlord did not argue with me. I have sometimes wondered about that. I told 2 people what had happened and received 2 different flavors of polite skepticism. A year later, I searched the address online and found that the house had been listed for rent again within 2 months of my leaving and had been relisted 4 times in the following 3 years. I do not know what any of the subsequent tenants experienced. I have not been able to find out. The basement door is the last thing I see some nights before I fall asleep. Standing open in that dark hallway, the smell of something living rising from below. I still do not know what walked out of that basement, or where it went when it was done standing at the foot of my bed. I have made a kind of partial peace with not knowing. Partial is the honest word. There is something particular about a home that has been yours for a long time, a place that contains years of your ordinary life, that makes it impossible to simply relocate the feeling of safety when the place itself begins to feel wrong. The next narrator lived in her apartment for 9 years before anything unusual happened. 9 years of ordinary life inside those walls, which means 9 years of trust built up and 9 years of familiarity to be turned against her when things began to change. Her name is Margot. She is 51 years old and she lives still in the same apartment. She has not been able to make herself leave. I still hear it. The knocking. 3 knocks from inside my bedroom closet at 2 in the morning, and I have been hearing it for going on 2 years. And every time I open that closet door, there is nothing inside it except my clothes and the smell of cedar from the blocks I placed on the shelf 6 months ago, because someone online told me cedar disrupted certain things. I do not know if I believe that. I do not know what I believe. I know what I hear. My name is Margot. I am 51, and I have lived in my apartment in a large city in the upper Midwest for 9 years. It is a good apartment on the 4th floor of a well-maintained building, and I chose it specifically because of the building's solidity, the way sound does not travel through its walls, the way it does in cheaper construction. I am a light sleeper, and I valued the quiet. For 8 of those 9 years, the apartment was exactly what I needed it to be. Quiet, solid, mine. I am a high school art teacher. I raised my daughter in this apartment after my husband and I divorced when she was 7, and she left for college 3 years before this story begins, which means I was alone in the apartment, and had been comfortably alone in it for 3 years before anything changed. I was not lonely. I was not anxious. I had friends, a full schedule, a life organized around my own preferences in a way that felt like something I had earned. The closet in question is in my bedroom. It runs the full length of one wall, a deep walk-in with a sliding door, and I have always kept it neat. I am a naturally organized person, and the closet reflected that. Seasonal clothes in labeled bins on the upper shelf, everything else hanging in a logical order, shoes lined up along the floor. I mention the order of it because the disorder is part of what began to disturb me. Not violence, not damage, just small displacements that I could not account for. A bin moved forward on the shelf, a pair of shoes facing the wrong direction, nothing missing, nothing destroyed, just a systematic, quiet rearrangement that happened over weeks and that I initially attributed, each individual time, to my own absent-mindedness. The first displacement I noticed was a grey wool sweater that I kept folded on the 3rd shelf. It was on the 2nd shelf one morning with the fold reversed. I stared at it for a moment and then refolded it and replaced it on the 3rd shelf and moved on with my day. The second displacement was a shoebox brought forward to the edge of the upper shelf, as though someone had been reaching for it. and not quite finished taking it down. The third was the cedar-lined jewelry box I keep on the center shelf, moved to the far left corner, its lid slightly ajar, though nothing inside was missing or disturbed. I did not connect these things to each other until the fourth week, when I came into the bedroom on a Saturday morning and found that every item in the closet had been taken from its place and reassembled on the floor in the center of the room in a single neat pile. Shoes on the bottom, then folded items, then hanging items, laid flat on top, then the boxes stacked with precision on the very top. A pile approximately 4 feet high in the center of my bedroom floor, composed of everything from the closet, arranged with a care that was more disturbing than chaos would have been. Nothing damaged, nothing missing, just removed and stacked while I slept 6 feet away. I called the building superintendent that morning and asked him to change my locks. He did so that afternoon. I asked if there had been any reports of unauthorized entry in the building. He said no. I asked if the building used a master key system and who had access to master keys. He confirmed the system, listed himself and the building manager and a maintenance contractor. I asked if he would be willing to tell me if anyone had been in my unit. He said no entry had been logged. I bought a doorbell camera that recorded the corridor outside my unit. I set it to motion-activated recording. Over the following 3 weeks, it recorded 17 incidents of motion in the corridor, all of which were neighbors and delivery personnel, and were entirely explicable. Not once did anything approach my door, and yet, on the third Thursday after the pile, I came home from school to find my closet emptied again, this time onto my bed, the same careful arrangement, the same systematic attention. My front door had been locked. My camera had recorded nothing. I checked the timestamps, and there was no gap in the footage. The knocking started the following week. 3 knocks, 2 in the morning, from inside the closed closet door, not from the wall behind it, from the door itself, as though a hand flat against the inner surface was striking it from inside. I woke to it the first time and lay in the dark and counted the knocks and waited. Nothing further. I got up and opened the closet. My clothes hung in their places. The bins were on their shelves. The shoes were in their row. I closed the door and went back to bed. The following Tuesday night it came again. 3 knocks. Samamirzard tempo. Same quality of sound that said hand against wood rather than pipe or structure. I opened the closet again. Same result. I had the apartment inspected by 2 different contractors who looked at the walls, the plumbing, the electrical. One of them suggested that thermal expansion in the building's skeleton sometimes produced knocking sounds in interior walls and closets, and that the third-floor unit sometimes did not insulate against it properly. I asked the third-floor tenant if she heard knocking in her bedroom closet. She looked at me with an expression I could not fully interpret, and said she did not, and then she closed her door more quickly than she needed to. The knocking has continued for 22 months. It comes between 2 and 3 in the morning, never more than once per night. Always 3 knocks, always from the inside of the closet door. I have recorded it on my phone. I have played the recording for 4 people. All 4 of them agreed it sounded like knuckles on wood. None of them have been able to explain it. I have placed a small wireless camera inside the closet facing the door. It records nothing when the knocking occurs. The memory card fills with dark still footage, and then at 2 in the morning, there are 3 knocks on the door that my phone captures clearly, and the camera inside the closet captures nothing at all. I have not been able to make myself leave. This is my home. 9 years of my life are inside these walls. My daughter grew up in this room. I am not willing to surrender it to something I cannot name or see or understand. So I stay, and some nights I lie in the dark, and I wait for 2 o'clock to come, and when the knocking comes I say, out loud, into the dark room, that I know it is there, and it will not make me leave. I do not know if that is brave, or foolish, or both. The knocking always stops after 3. I have never opened the door fast enough to catch the silence still vibrating in the wood, but I keep trying. Every person who sends this channel an account eventually says some version of the same thing. They say that the moment they cannot shake is not the most dramatic moment of the experience. It is the moment just before, when everything was still ordinary, and they did not yet know what was coming. The last account tonight is from a man named Shepherd, who is 26 years old, and who was, at the time of these events, 6 weeks into living alone for the first time in his life. That was 14 months ago. 3 weeks ago I got a new roommate, a friend from work who needed a place to stay, and the first morning she was there she came out of the bathroom and asked me who had been in her room overnight. I live alone. I told her I had been asleep. She said she had heard someone moving in the room, slowly, near the foot of the bed. She moved out after the weekend. She did not explain why. She just said she could not stay there, and she was sorry. My name is Shepherd, and I am 26. I grew up in a loud house full of siblings, and the first apartment I ever had to myself was a one-bedroom in a converted older building in a mid-sized city in Georgia. I moved in at the beginning of what should have been one of the better periods of my life. New job, good pay, my own space for the first time. I had never lived alone before, and I had been looking forward to it with genuine enthusiasm. The apartment was on the second floor of a building that had originally been something else. A small textile warehouse, was told, converted to residential units sometime in the 90s. The ceilings were high, and the windows were large, and the walls were exposed brick, and I found all of it genuinely beautiful, in the way that young people find repurposed industrial spaces beautiful when they are living in them for the first time. The first week was perfect. The schedule I wanted to keep. Set up the apartment the way I wanted to. Kept the schedule I wanted to keep. I stayed up late watching things I wanted to watch and slept in on the weekend without anyone needing anything from me. I was happy in a specific, quiet way that I had not expected to feel quite so completely. The first week of the second month I noticed that the temperature in my bedroom was consistently lower than the rest of the apartment. Not drastically, perhaps 3 or 4 degrees. Enough that I noticed it when I moved from the hallway into the bedroom, a slight but distinct drop that I felt across my forearms and the back of my neck. I mentioned it to the building manager, who said the insulation in the exterior wall of that unit was original to the conversion and was thinner than it should be. She said she would put in a work order. The work order was never completed. I bought a space heater. The first signal came about 10 days into the second month. I was in the kitchen making dinner, nothing unusual about the evening, when I heard someone knock on my front door. 3 knocks. I went to the door and looked through the peephole, and the corridor was empty. I opened the door and looked both ways down the hall. No one. I closed the door and went back to the kitchen. About 20 minutes later, 3 more knocks. Empty corridor. I told myself it was the neighbors and went back to my pasta and did not think about it. The second incident came 5 nights later. I was in bed at about midnight, not yet asleep, phone in hand, when I heard the sound of breathing. Close. In the room with me. Not my own breathing. Slower than mine and slightly irregular. The breathing of something large doing it without urgency, just existing, just occupying the dark space of my bedroom alongside me. I turned on the lamp with a speed I did not decide to have. The room was empty. The closet door was standing open the way I always left it. Nothing in the shadows. Nothing behind the door. I sat up in bed with my back against the headboard and the lamp on, and I stayed like that for about an hour, and then I turned the lamp off and lay down, and the breathing did not come back. And in the morning, I told myself it had been white noise from a fan in a neighboring unit bleeding through the thin walls. I told myself that for 8 days. And then, on the 9th night, I woke up in complete darkness and complete silence, and I knew with a certainty that bypassed reasoning entirely and arrived as a physical fact that something was standing at the foot of my bed. I could not see it. The room was too dark. I could not hear it. There was no breathing this time, no movement, no sound at all. But the quality of the darkness at the foot of the bed was different from the quality of the darkness elsewhere in the room, in a way I cannot explain more precisely than that. Denser, somehow, more occupied. I lay completely still for a very long time, and the darkness at the foot of the bed did not change, and did not move, and did not do anything at all. And eventually, slowly, the room began to gray with the first light of dawn coming through the curtains. And as the light grew, the density at the foot of the bed simply was not there anymore, and I lay in the early morning light for another hour before I was able to get up. That was a Tuesday. I told no one. I do not fully know why. Part of it was that I had nothing to report that I could explain to another person in terms that would not make me sound either frightened of nothing or actively unwell. I had heard breathing. I had felt a presence. Neither of these things is a police report, so I stayed, and 2 nights later the presence was at the foot of the bed again, and this time when the dawn came and the density dissolved, I found that the sheets at the foot of the bed were pulled down, not dramatically, perhaps 6 inches, as though something had taken the edge of the sheet between 2 fingers and drawn it slowly toward the floor. I live alone. I had not moved in the night. My sleep tracker on my phone confirmed I had been essentially still for 7 consecutive hours. I called my sister, who is 3 years older than me, and reliably practical, and I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her, and when I finished, she said she was coming to stay with me for the weekend, not because she believed me necessarily, but because she wanted to see for herself. She came on Friday evening. We stayed up late, talking in the living room, and I felt, for the first time in weeks, genuinely comfortable in the apartment. Having another person in the space changed the texture of it entirely. We went to bed at around 1 in the morning, she in the bedroom and I on the couch, and the night passed without incident. Saturday night the same. I began to wonder if I had simply been alone too long and too much inside my own head. She left Sunday afternoon. Sunday night the presence was back. This time, I turned on the lamp the moment I felt the density change at the foot of the bed. The room was lit and empty, but across the foot of the bed, pressed into the fabric of the comforter, were 2 long parallel depressions, the kind of marks that hands make when laid flat and bearing weight, as though something had leaned its palms onto the foot of my bed and pressed down. I stared at those impressions until they slowly lifted as the comforter expanded back to its normal shape. I have no photograph of that, because I was not fast enough, and because for a significant portion of the time, I was staring at them. I was not capable of moving. I moved my mattress into the living room that night, and I slept with every light on, and the television running for the next 3 weeks, until my lease term gave me a legitimate exit, and I moved into a new place across the city. I told the building manager I had found somewhere closer to work. She did not seem surprised. She processed my exit paperwork quickly and without questions. I have wondered about that since. My new apartment is on the 6th floor of a building built in this decade. Nothing has happened in it. I sleep in a bedroom with the door closed and the foot of the bed against the wall, and I have not felt a change in the quality of darkness since the night I moved in. My friend from work, the one who moved in with me 14 months after I left the building, lasted 1 weekend. She heard something moving at the foot of the guest bed. She would not tell me more than that. She said she was sorry, and she left, and she has not been back, and she will not talk about it in any detail. The spare room is empty now. I have not been able to find another person willing to use it for more than a night. I do not go to the foot of my own bed without turning on a light first. I have not been able to stop doing this. I do not know what it would cost me to stop. I am not sure. I want to find out. Those are tonight's 3 accounts. A house in Pennsylvania with footprints that stopped at the foot of a sleeping woman's bed and led nowhere. An apartment in the Midwest where a closet knocks 3 times every night from the inside. A converted warehouse unit in Georgia where something stood at the foot of a young man's bed and pressed its palms into his comforter while he lay paralyzed in the light of a bedside lamp. In none of these cases did any official investigation reach a conclusion that accounted for what the narrators described. In every case, the authorities who were contacted found nothing actionable, nothing explainable, and nothing that gave these people any framework for understanding their own experiences. Dara moved out, and the house relisted 4 more times. Margot stayed, and the knocking has not stopped. Shepard moved out, and the presence followed his guest, if not him. None of these loops are closed. All 3 of these people are living ordinary lives that contain, inside them, something unresolved that they will carry for the rest of their lives. If you have experienced something inside your own home that you have not been able to explain or have not been able to forget, this channel wants to hear from you. The submission link is in the description below. Use whatever name you need to use. We protect every identity that is entrusted to us. There is no experience too small and no account too strange. Some of the most significant submissions we have received began with a sentence like, "I know this sounds like nothing but." It does not sound like nothing to us. We take all of it seriously. We are Midnight Outcry. Subscribe if you have not already, and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss the accounts that are coming. There is a great deal more in our inbox. We will see you next week. Please, before you go, check that your closet door is fully closed. We are sure it is fine. We are almost certain.